Well, I saw the trailer for Supergirl, and there's a little more scenes, obviously. Uh, that's been doled out through teasers and whatnot, and that sort of thing. Um, the interesting thing is the Masters of the Universe trailer came out, and I got concerns about that movie. I'm more interested in DC properties because I'm more of a fan of that than the He-Man stuff, but I respect it and all that. Um, but anyway, both of them are utilizing fantastic worlds and all this sort of stuff and that type of scenery, and the same CGI technology and what have you. And even with Masters of the Universe, I saw it. It does have that muddy look to it. There's theories about it. Talked about that on Pop Culture Breakdown, and Doomcock's channel, and stuff like that. That perhaps the extra color information puts a drain on bandwidth and whatnot. So they intentionally do this to mute it to a certain extent, to where, uh, but it just doesn't take up the bandwidth, what have you. And perhaps that's true. You would think there's a reason to it because that kind of look, you do see it a lot. A lot of the Marvel movies have had it and all that sort of thing. So I guess it's become a bit of a standard. But even so, since both of them kind of had that, you know, aesthetic that I don't particularly care for, because it's, probably didn't really notice it as much the first time I saw that years ago, but now it's like, oh my God, not again, and stuff like that. But it seemed the Masters of the Universe trailer, and it was a more exciting trailers, for adventure and wondrous world and all that type of stuff than the Supergirl one, even though Supergirl goes to alien worlds and that kind of thing. Whereas for the Masters of the Universe, it's just Eternia, but it looked, rather dynamic. It did evoke a lot of the familiar imagery of the Earl Norham artwork that was done for the Masters of the Universe line in the 80s. And, he's a painter and it all looks really cool, a lot cooler than you tend to see it. I mean, I mostly knew that stuff from the Filmation cartoon, which, had its own fantastical scenery and stuff. But seeing it in those paintings, which, it's akin to the type of cover art you might have seen for Conan the Barbarian. In fact, I think Earl Norm did Conan the Barbarian, the cover for Savage Sword of Conan and stuff like that. And also, heavy metal and the like. I don't know if he did any heavy metal, but that aesthetic, that quality of paintings capturing fantastic scenes, and it it did a good job on that. For the Supergirl one, well, you got your alien world and some sort of space station and stuff like that. Then there's her spaceship as well, and well, it's pretty lackluster in comparison. So that's just the aesthetics. And look, if the story's compelling enough, is that really going to matter? No, it really will not to me. A lot of aesthetics, and I've been very forgiving on CGI in general. Well, the monster doesn't look all that real. Basically is the thing like that. And I was very rather soft and kind on the CW shows when I readily admitted, those weren't that great. But every now and then, some of them, they did a better job than most. And some of them actually, like for a while there, the Flash series, I thought did some good episodes. But on the whole, yeah, not all that much. But so it's more that the depression of Supergirl, narrative wise, is what they show you here. She's not all that optimistic, and well, got a better attitude that Superman has. She just doesn't have that. Now, the dynamic there, with anyone knows even the basics of the differences between the two, is it's understandable that she would have at least that period in her life of being that, and it's been addressed. James Gunn, when he was introducing his DCU, and perhaps he thinks this, I don't know, but that, wow, this is a side of Supergirl we've never seen. Well, in a movie, yeah, and I don't know how much I did watch the first season of the Supergirl show. And of course, it wasn't on CW when it first debuted, but eventually it went there before it just got a parody of itself and became ridiculous. And ultimately, though, her attitude was very Superman-like in that she had an optimistic attitude. She believed in humanity and, and the goodness of people and stuff like that. And I think they did address the idea that she's very much aware that she witnessed the end. They did depict her as being very young uh, when she left. That she was the original plan for her was to be a babysitter for baby Kal-El. The problem is her father was not as good at rocketry as his brother was, Jor-El. So the time differential of traveling through space, she spent a lot more time out there than Kal-El. And so by the time she reaches Earth, despite Kal-El having been an infant while she was a young teenager, he's a 30-year-old man or thereabouts, maybe 27. And so it's like, well, there's that, but also she knew Krypton. She got to live some life on Krypton. That's her world. She was a young lady thereabouts when it died, and she had to tearfully say goodbye to her parents and all that. And off she goes. And it looks like, yes, they do depict that in the film. So you can understand the setup there. But again, I don't know how much they depicted it in the show. In the comics, yes. For a while, Supergirl had a very rather innocent approach to things. When things went bad, she understood she had to use her power to stop the bad guy, and that stuff would irritate her and stuff like that. But like the Helen Slater performance in the 80s movie, the first Supergirl movie, that's how she was depicted. And she was, and she was alien in that sense. She didn't quite understand, humanity and that sort of thing. And of course, in that version, the city of Argo hadn't been destroyed yet. She was looking for a power source to save it, and ultimately, she's able to do that in the plot of that movie. That's not really the story, but that's how they decided to do it in that. So it's like, wow, there's all these Kryptonians that are still alive in the Christopher Reeve version of Superman and all that. And he just didn't know it. But anyway, had it been more successful, maybe there would have been a follow-up and a crossover. Who the hell knows? But anyway, her approach to the character was like that. She was not down in the dumps and depressed and wanting to get drunk and all that sort of stuff. And I understand people being at odds with it. And it just seems to be something that the movie just wants to play up about her depression, which is a typical narrative point for the likes of Tom King, whose comic book inspired this story for the movie, A Woman of Tomorrow, that he did, which ultimately people quickly figured out was basically True Grit, but with Supergirl. And that's the deal. She helps this young girl hunt down the man who killed her daddy and all that. But it looks like the movie's going to have its own plot with Supergirl that helping the girl won't necessarily be her motivation, but rather that Krypto's in trouble and will die if she doesn't get this antidote for this poison that the villain put in him. And probably more to the point that the reason Krypto is capable of being poisoned is because Supergirl wanted to go to this planet that has a red sun where she won't have any superpowers so she can get drunk. And I assume she'll be having her birthday, which is in the book, the comic book. That's how it begins. Actually begins with the girl seeking somebody to help her hunt down the man who killed her father. And then she encounters Supergirl. Well, she's there getting drunk because it's her 21st birthday, and she's very upset because it's just reminding her of what she's lost in Krypton. And she lived through that, and it's traumatic. So you can understand her attitude would be very different from Superman. And that's the point of departure, I guess, to start the story that they want to go with. I mean, obviously, with Kara Zor-El. Now, there were scenes in the trailer where she appears to be warning the girl that you don't want to go down this path, it's not right, and all this stuff, to where, at first she's like all nihilistic and doesn't care about anything. And the only thing it seems she does care about is her dog, because it's really all she has left of home is this Krypto dog. Everybody else she knew was gone, and her own parents, and all that. And but along the way, she's learning stuff. So you got some of the narratives in it about how Superman believes or sees the good in all people, but Supergirl says, "I see the truth." He's just a naive fool, and I know better. But along the way, I'm assuming if they allow this, that she's going to have this hero's journey in the story, which would be to their benefit to do this, that she learns she can't just stay like that, especially when she does have power to do things. She was helpless to save her own, but she can save others. She can stop that from happening to other people. Of course, she can't save the girl's father. He's already dead. But she can save the girl from going to a dark place, perhaps. And she recognizes how that girl feels and doesn't want to see that happen to her, especially since the girl is so much younger and that's going to reach her, that she's still a little innocent even though what's happened, and perhaps that kind of thing. And that wouldn't be too bad. It's a darker story than what one might expect from Superman, where you don't expect Superman to be the dark character. You expect the villain would be. And Superman's got to wrestle with what his options are to stop the evil from happening. But for Supergirl, she's going to be wrestling directly with herself in this. And so the narrative, you can make an argument for it because of the details. But he says, how do you get her from that to the character she actually becomes? And some of that goes that she doesn't understand the earth, that she's lost in it. But if it's this kind of dismissive, I can't be bothered attitude and this spoiled brat type thing, even though she has justification for her nihilism because her whole world was destroyed in front of her, she's not going to be very likable, and she's not going to become basically the angel that she's seen as. I mean, otherwise hey, look, she's just this derivative Superman character, and that's true, but you've chosen to give her her own movie, so you got to make something of it. And that's the character she's recognized as, and you can see it as well. This sort of thing should have been addressed. And it's going to be difficult to do it if she's already there at the outset. That's how they introduced her in Superman, that she's in this bad place because of what's happened. And ultimately, her birthday is just bringing it all back, and she's suffering from it, and she's not doing well coping with it. And then this adventure comes along that the young girl will learn something, but it's really what does Supergirl learn and that kind of thing. Handled well, might be a good enough compelling story in and of itself, and that and is that the point of Woman of Tomorrow, is what kind of woman does Supergirl want to be? You know, right now she's lost. She doesn't have the world that she would have grown up on, and she would have been this person that she can never be now because that world is gone. And she's got this adopted planet that her cousin adopted, and he's the only family she's got left. And obviously, there's some distance there because she doesn't really know him. If they're doing the same story, then she probably knew him as an infant, and probably did babysit him when on Krypton a time or two. And then all hell breaks loose. But some of the elements that she learns there, some of the points that Superman would make to her might ring in her head, and she's like, yeah, he's right. It's maybe it's a little too gee whiz, but it's the ideal that you pursue, whether you achieve it or not. The pursuit thereof makes you better, and so on. And that would be a great thing to do. Do I really see that coming out of a James Gunn there? I mean, especially after Peacemaker season 2, I don't know. I mean, geez, where's his head at? I mean, and it's like, hey, he's not the director. It's Craig Gillespie, I believe. And yeah, but everything about it, the look of it, it looks like Guardians of the Galaxy, and the music and all that stuff. It's all very much, um, the hallmark and aesthetic of James Gunn. Certainly after Guardians of the Galaxy, including with the music. I think the first teaser, had the Blondie song and all that. I mean, first of all, the idea is, well, Supergirl is this young girl. She might be taken with that music and stuff, but she's an alien. I mean, I don't know what teenagers on Krypton were doing. I guess, might should have thought that through, but would she really go for some song from the 80s that James Gunn liked? And I like it too. I like Blondie music. It's cool. It always sounds cool. But, I get the point. It's something to, set the stage and the mood for where she is, where she wakes up hungover and all that. But, things like that, it's minor, and ultimately wouldn't matter if the main points were made, but the concern is it wasn't even thought about, as far but the line of her warning the girl about her attitude and going down the dark path, it is something of a hopeful sign, in that that's more of the point of the movie, so that there is an absolute heroic aspect to Supergirl, rather than she's just the drunken older girl with this younger girl being in awe of her power and watching her throw guys around and stuff like that. And then that's it. Where she says, look, it's not right to just go around and abuse power or anything like that. Now, I did what I did because they came at me and all that, but, it's not all that great. Now, how the story ends in the book. Now, the book, Supergirl's drunk early on. She doesn't maintain that attitude throughout the story. It's over very quickly. And then she's on the mission for the girl, and runs into the villain. Doesn't really like him very much because he's a nasty guy and so on. And then, well, they're off on the adventure. So it's very, Crypto gets injured by him, but his life's not in danger or any of that. It's not a major plot point. But ultimately it jumps after they win, they defeat him and capture him, and Supergirl decides to incarcerate him in the Phantom Zone. And so that's what's done there. And maybe they'll do the same thing here. I don't know. But after that, they jump to the future for Supergirl and the young girl. But she isn't young anymore. She's an old lady. And turns out, however many decades have gone by, a long, long time. And the guy was still in the Phantom Zone. So they decided at this point, I guess his sentence was up or whatever, however many decades. And the girl's an alien, so maybe she's a century or so old, and Supergirl maybe too, because she's Supergirl, so her lifespan, you can imagine, is much longer than human beings, and so on. But nevertheless, the guy's been in there a long time. They let him out, and he's broken and desperate and is begging for forgiveness and everything. And spoilers for how that story ends. The woman decides to kill him and does. It beats him to death with her can. Maybe she had the sword still and stabbed him. I can't remember. And Supergirl's like, well, it was your choice. And that's it. Or I guess she's Superwoman by then. But anyway, and that's how they ended it. I mean, if you're going to do the story about to not be as dismissive and brutal as the villain is, I'm not sure that that measures up. It certainly isn't what Superman would willingly do. Now, of course, well, Zack Snyder did that. It's a different scenario, and with Zod and Superman couldn't figure out how to stop him otherwise. So yeah, he killed him. He wasn't happy about it, obviously. He cried about it afterwards, so it's fine. you know. So I don't know, and it's like, this is typical. There's an adaptation of the story, but that doesn't mean it follows it completely. I mean, right off the bat, Lobo's in it, and I don't know if this is like a thing where the girl is trying to hire Lobo to hunt down the villain, and she ends up with Supergirl instead. And I seem to recall, I think Tom King wanted Lobo to appear in the Supergirl comic, but they said, oh, well, we're doing something else with him or something like that. This happens all the time in the comic books. And sometimes you either replace the character with another one or make up one, or you just, well, we can write around it and just not do it. And I guess that's what they did. And then now it's like, well, there's a chance to introduce Jason Momoa as Lobo, which just about anybody who has any interest in this would agree that it's probably the role he was tailor made for him. And it's one of the more exciting aspects of the movie, despite the fact it ain't a Lobo movie, it's a Supergirl movie. But that's the situation you're in. So, so I think that's the more telling point, that she has this journey. But if she's the same asshole at the end than she is at the beginning, then I don't think that'll go well. And I say asshole, it's just the attitude. I mean, you understand why she has the attitude. She's in a dark place, terrible thing happened. And some of that garners the sympathy in her for the girl. And that sort of thing. And all well and good and everything, but if it achieves that, then well, that will be better for it. The overall problem is the position the movie's in due to the failure of the Superman movie. It didn't do the numbers it needed to do. As you look at the numbers, well, it's kind of okay. It's not a kind of okay movie. This had to jumpstart and basically restart a DC movie franchise to be on par with what Marvel used to be. So they wanted to compete with Marvel. Marvel's in serious trouble, so there's not much to compete with right now. So maybe it didn't have to be as great as it would have had in Marvel's Infinity War era or something like that. But yeah, it had to knock it out of the park, and it's my opinion, but I can think you can justify it by the numbers and all that. It did not achieve this, and so that leaves Supergirl to come in and ignite excitement for the DCU franchise. Now, I'm sure there's elements in there that will lead into Man of Tomorrow, and perhaps some of the scenes it looks like that might be the work of Brainiac. I Unless they're going to rewrite more of the lore where Kara came from Kandor and not Argo or something like that. So then that might mean her parents are still alive in the bottled city of Kandor. I don't know how they're going to put that together. Um, and so it leads into it. And okay, you can understand it. It's supposed to be a shared universe and that sort of thing. And it was always thought it was a good idea that you have Supergirl in a Superman versus Brainiac movie because she's gonna know who Brainiac is. She would have been there when this happened, at least in the usual story. Depending on how they depict it in this. So it would make sense for her to be in Man of Tomorrow. So, all right, but the other problem is other baggage that Superman left for her is Kryptonian society, as revealed by Jor-El's beliefs in that anywhere he's this creepy fascist guy. He expects Superman to take a harem and make babies out of the Earth women and dominate the world and conquer it and rule it because they're lesser than him and all this sort of stuff. So it's like, well, what kind of person is Kara? So now you got to kind of rewrite it. Oh, Jor-El, he had crazy ideas, something stupid like that. When the easiest thing in the world would have been this fit right in with Luthor's plot to turn humanity against Superman, that he was this invader and he was dangerous and they should see him as an enemy. And then you come to find out that he faked it. He doctored the video so that people saw that and heard this conquest talk. And but didn't do that. And then when pressed about it, James Gunn said, "No, it's not a fake message. That's what Jor-El said." So that talk about rewriting the lore, and really disrespectful to it in a lot of ways. And then where are you going to go with this? And now your next movie is Supergirl, who's someone who lived in that society. So Clark Kent, well, he grew up in Kansas being a farm boy on Earth and all that. But Kara Zor-El, well, she grew up in this, I don't know, fascist planet or whatever. Yeah. So her attitude's going to be even worse. It's not just the alcohol. So my guess is they'll have to throw it off as some stupid little silly dialogue that, crazy Uncle Jor-El and his ideas, and that it was a minority view or whatever that he espoused to, but most Kryptonians didn't, or something like that. Blow it off and then move on from there. Which makes it pointless to have done in the first place. It would have made much more sense that this is something Lex Luthor did to frame Superman and stuff like that. But, well, didn't do that. So, this is the type of stuff that gives the Supergirl more hardship that it really didn't deserve, through no fault of its own for the film, But that's the situation she's in. And now she's again got to reignite or ignite excitement for this franchise. And it's not really something that the Supergirl movie was really meant to do. And so I don't think it can, even if it's really good. I mean, it would have to be some kind of secret masterpiece. And it's like, what could it be? And it's just, yeah, I wasn't expecting much. And of course, lowered expectations can go a long way. But damn, this was a good movie. And stuff like that. And then that would take, word of mouth. It's possible. It could, something like that could occur. Do I think that's there? Well, by all accounts, the test screenings aren't going well. So the likelihood is no, it will not be able to achieve anything like that. So even if it's good just for the movie itself, makes its money back and all that, and makes a profit. Um, that's that's not what the franchise need. Okay, good enough, but not good enough for what the franchise needs as it is now, because too much damage has been done. And even that at the outset, it's not Gunn's fault that they're in that position. It's the leadership of Warner Brothers before that forced this. That because the DCEU had failed, and the different directions they kept jerking it around and going to, and never really had any vision of where to go. And I guess Snyder's the only one who really did. But that was what he managed to complete 2 movies, and then you had to get a fan protest to get his third movie out eventually, long after it was all over with. So the movies that were done by people who replaced him, well, it was scattered, didn't quite know what they were doing, couldn't make a deal with Cavill, couldn't get, and of course, Ben Affleck had his own problems and stuff, but still, those guys got jerked around. But nevertheless, that's got nothing to do with James Gunn. It's not his fault that's the situation he came into. But the choices for his Superman movie, that is his responsibility. And why he chose it that way, to be this ensemble that people theorize that that's what he's comfortable with, and all he knows how to do with, I guess, the superhero aesthetic. I don't know. Um, it was a mistake. I think they'd have been better off, and probably would have been cheaper, had they just kept the Superman movie a Superman movie. That means it's just the Superman cast of characters. The Daily Planet people, of course, Lois and Jimmy. And then, okay, your villain, and Lex Luthor's like, oh, gee, I'm sick of Lex Luthor. And I can understand that after all these Superman movies. Um, but Lex Luthor is not just his main villain, but as his main villain, he's kind of a cast member of it as much as Lois and Jimmy are. Of course, he doesn't work at the Daily Planet, but it's fitting he would be in there and up to no good and that kind of thing. Um, and it would have been cheaper to do, regardless of what his evil plot was and all that. But he had to bring in basically his Justice League, and Superman becomes a guest star in his own movie. Now, it looks like, at least for this story, Supergirl's going to get a better shot at least that kind of narrative, in the sense that she's the main character. So I guess there's that. But again, it's elements that are against it that has nothing to do with the quality of the film unto itself. And that's the unfairness of it. But it's the situation you're in, it's the circumstances you're in, and it doesn't do much for you to point it out or whine about that, if anyone would. And I don't think they would. Instead, she's basically reading from the same script that a lot of actresses do. Well, as a woman in Hollywood and all that stuff, it's rinse, lather, repeat. It's a mistake. I mean, when you really should be promoting your movie, but a lot of people take it from, oh, you already know it's pretty bad. If you didn't fully understand that, because they keep reshooting it or something of that nature. Apparently, they went back in to add more Superman scenes, which is a bit odd. You would think you would have that, since you want to do the connectivity of it, but I don't know. And it might just be the scene of Superman you see in the trailer is something they put in there to add a little extra to it. So, see, remember Superman, and all that and stuff like that. But surely, when her story's over, she does meet up with him afterward, and perhaps to acknowledge she's, in a better place after all this. But other than that, Well, don't know. And of course, that's always the case. Hope, anyone can hope that it works out, but it's not going to achieve what they need it to do for the overall franchise. As for the movie itself, we do all right, but if the shared universe thing gets scrapped yet again, odds are there won't be any sequel for Supergirl, at least not this Supergirl. So I don't know. Um, but her response to it, like I said, the rinse, lather, repeat lines. People are comparing her to Rachel Zegler, which she hadn't quite got there yet. Hopefully, this is the bulk of it from her Vanity Fair interview, and I'll leave it like that. She does crap like that. Well, that I mean, pay attention to what became of Miss Zegler. You can't go immediately out and just start attacking the audience before they've even seen your film. Uh, Criticizing things in a trailer, it's not the whole movie, but it is the advertisement for it. And so if people make their judgment on whether they're going to bother to go see it based on a trailer, and they're like, "Ugh, I don't like this," yeah, it's definitive. Now, trailers, as I often said, can be terrible in their representation of the movie. The movie can actually be much better than what you see in a trailer. Sometimes the opposite is true. Sometimes the trailer looks spectacular, and then the movie is just garbage. So, but whatever, people make their decision on what they expect it to be. And if they decided, well, I'm not going to give it a chance because I think it'll just be a waste of my money, then that's that. You lost them. But doubly so if you go around doing ridiculous sentiments of people want to control women's bodies or something. Uh, and all that sort of thing. Well, you're all a bunch of misogynists and this sort of thing. If you're going into that level where you're mad at the audience out the gate, it means, whoa, what's wrong with this movie? Is what everyone is thinking. So, wow, I guess I just won't bother, especially since I think you're insulting me and this sort of thing. So it's a bad idea to do that, but you've heard it a million times. It isn't just Rachel Zegler. It's always, I think this sounds very smart, and it really isn't. But it also, if it's some sort of strategy that you can somehow shame the audience into seats by accusing them of misogyny or what have you, yeah, that doesn't work. We've already seen at least the past 10 years of that strategy used for films from Ghostbusters on down. Um, it does not work. In fact, it makes it worse. And it's detrimental to one's career. I mean, all right, so the Supergirl thing doesn't work out, but you're a young actress. There's other roles that you can be pursuing. And now it's like, oh, that's that little snot, and it sticks to you. It's hard to beat that off, and especially when beat that off. Sorry, beat it back or what have you. When you're supposed to be promoting the movie, and the main thing about what do you say about the movie you've been involved in? You said, "Hey, it's a fun adventure movie. We had a lot of fun making it, and I hope you like it. Please come and see it." That's what you do. That's it. Your obligations are more than met by that. And then, oh, well, there's some silly story scene you had, I don't know, with Jason Momoa or something like that. And everybody gets a little giggle tee hee out of it all. And that's all great and everything. But that's what you do. You're not changing humanity with your Supergirl movie. Your main objective is basically to entertain. Now, of course, the basics of hero's journey, a good versus evil story, and that sort of thing. Yeah, there's importance to that narrative, but it's the kind of the basics everyone already knows. It's just a matter of how good is the performance of the film on that. Now, a lot of elements, uh, Millie Alcock does a good job. She's a capable actress and all that, but the material is terrible, and so she would just be a talent that's wasted on that. And that in and of itself I could certainly understand being irritated by something like that because she's the face of the movie. And that's always the case with these things. It's not necessarily the actor's fault that the movie failed. In fact, more times than not, it isn't. But you don't blame that on the audience. And of course, when you're obligated to promote it, you're not really in a position to suddenly go out and say, well, the script was crap. These guys don't listen. They were stupid. Uh, the director was an a-hole. She just can't. Years later, she can talk about, well, here's what happened. It's not really going to matter much anymore. Uh, that kind of thing. But right now, oh no, she can't do that. But I know that's frustrating. But you can't then go out and dump crap on the audience because they're like, okay, well, I won't be seeing you no more. You know. So many lessons. So I guess, hey, there is something to learn from a Supergirl movie. That might just be the case.